Right now, our top-secret missiles and drones are tearing through defenses and turning enemy military facilities into hellish ashes. A strike of terrifying power has hit the Kremlin. Shock, Russia will freeze. The Kremlin is trying to hide the deadly disaster. Blackout across all of Russia. The strikes on the air defense system have reached a critical target. A Russian nuclear power plant was disconnected from the power grid by a precision missile. Russians have already started to freeze, and this is only the beginning from Ukraine. Urgent alert. The Zaporizhzhia front exploded, the enemy went for broke. Right now, Ukrainian military forces are disrupting Russia's plans with lightning-fast counterattacks and have already achieved the impossible. This is a must-see. The Kremlin is on its knees. Putin is begging the US for a deal. What secret scenarios are being discussed behind the world's back? Putin is on the run. The Russian capital is a death zone. The dictator has disappeared from everyone. Moscow is no longer safe. All this and more in our broadcast. Hotspot. Urgent. Russia is in a fiery collapse. Ukraine delivers a strike of unprecedented power, a shocking sensation. Our latest missiles and drones are breaking through defenses and turning the enemy's military and energy facilities into fiery ruins. Which Ukrainian innovations are scorching the Russian rear? Why are these systems already being called a technological breakthrough capable of changing the course of the war? All the explosive details. Watch now.
Self-propelled artillery, mortars, drones, electronic warfare, shells, ammunition, communication systems, air defense, missiles. Ukraine is actively ramping up the production of its own military equipment and ammunition. Production is becoming increasingly precise, large-scale, and technologically advanced.
During this war, Ukraine has already reached a milestone. Almost 60% of the weapons we have, the weapons our soldiers use, are Ukrainian-made, and these are powerful weapons with many advanced features.
This is no longer just a local industry. Ukraine is building its own military technological shield, a network of production lines, testing grounds, and combat units that turn ideas into weaponry. And our specialists immediately test them in real conditions.
The Ukrainian side is scaling up strike systems with a range of over 1,000 kilometers.
Let's start with drones, small but decisive technology that overnight changed the rules of war. The F1 family of strike platform series. In 2024, about 1 million units were contracted, and already
by the year 2025, production levels had increased significantly, reaching a total of 30,000 FPV drones being manufactured each month. This marked a substantial improvement in output compared to previous years. It should be noted that this quantity, that is the annual production of FPV drones, about 4 million, is a record figure, even taking into account the capabilities of the military-industrial complexes of all NATO countries combined. In other words, at this moment, the Ukrainian defense industrial complex is producing an unprecedented number of unmanned aerial vehicles. For comparison, the United States Army replenishes its own arsenal with unmanned aerial vehicles at a rate of approximately 100,000 per year. Once again, I want to emphasize, the Ukrainian defense industry produces up to 4 million drones.
The technological production recipe is simple. A composite fuselage, 3D printed wings, inexpensive components, and open-source navigation solutions. All this makes it possible to produce working platforms in batches. But you can't cut costs on electronics. Navigation and guidance systems make the drones resistant to Russian electronic warfare. Otherwise, mass waves of launches won't break through the enemy's dense defenses. In parallel with drones, a strategic direction is also developing. Here, the key players are missiles and missile systems that strike at the enemy's rear, depriving them of fuel, depots, and command nodes. Neptune is a domestic anti-ship and coastal missile system that has strengthened the security of maritime borders and given Kyiv tools to impact the enemy's logistics in the Black Sea. Here,
an unprecedented case in world history has occurred. The point is that Ukraine, as a country that effectively does not possess a navy, has inflicted severe damage on the Russian Federation by destroying up to 35% of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels at one time. According to the British side, the naval activity of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea Basin has decreased as a result of the use of strike drones and, accordingly, naval drones. It has dropped to a historic minimum.
Another important milestone is the FPV-5 Flamingo cruise missile. This is a fully Ukrainian development with a declared range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
For comparison, the legendary American Tomahawk has a strike range of 1,600 kilometers. The Tomahawk's warhead is about 500 kilograms, while the Flamingo's warhead is around 1,150 kilograms. The most recent documented evidence of the Flamingo's use is a strike on the oil terminal in Tuapse. Moreover, Russian public channels themselves confirmed that the Ukrainian side used these strike assets.
By combining small drones and large cruise missiles, Ukraine gains both scale and strategy. Drones keep the enemy on edge, missiles strike critical targets, and together this seriously undermines the enemy's ability to wage a prolonged war. But Ukrainian defense is not just about small and large systems, but also time-tested developments like Bohdana, Stugna, and other artillery and anti-tank systems which provide mobility, firepower resilience, and operate within a unified strike network. Drone reconnaissance, artillery adjustment, precision missile strike. So at
40% of the Russian budget depends on revenues from the sale of oil and petroleum products. And accordingly, taking into account this budget-forming sector of the occupying country, adjustments are made to the actions of the Ukrainian side, namely the use of strike drones and means of destruction. We're talking about the Flamingo and Neptune systems in the context of neutralizing the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation. According to the Russian side's assessment, losses resulting from the Ukrainian strike on the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation are estimated at around $100 billion.
Ukraine's production capabilities are already extending beyond its borders. Through agreements and joint projects, Ukrainian companies are legalizing assembly and serial production in European countries. If before the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian defense industry was lagging behind, then by 2024 production volumes reached about $9 billion, and in 2025 they grew to $35 billion. Plans for 2026 include scaling up to $60 billion. And this is just the beginning.
Russia is on the brink of an energy collapse. Winter is preparing to deliver a freezing blow. The country could be left without electricity and heat. Precise Ukrainian strikes are hitting the very heart of Russia's energy system. Panic is growing, while the Kremlin is hiding the true scale of the disaster. The real scenario is much scarier than it seems. All the explosive details are coming up next.
On the night of November 9th, the Ukrainian armed forces struck the Voronezh CHP plant. After the strike, electricity disappeared in several homes, but then came back. The Voronezh CHP is one of the largest suppliers of thermal energy in the region and provides heating to 4 districts of the city.
Right before my eyes, I had just stepped out onto the balcony. Right over there, exactly. Apparently, it went along the wires, basically. No, well, I heard 3, but they're saying 4.
In Belgorod, the CHP plant was attacked, which left tens of thousands of residents without power. The governor of the region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, stated that the damage is very serious.
As a result of yesterday evening's missile strike, there is serious damage to the power and heating supply systems of the city of Belgorod. But our energy workers, as always, are heroically trying to cope with the task at hand. Right now, they are working on restoration from the damage inflicted on us by the enemy.
A day earlier, Ukrainian drones struck energy facilities in Saratov, Engels, and the Volgograd region. Power outages were also reported there. With massive drone and missile attacks, Russia is trying to plunge Ukraine into a blackout. In response, the Ukrainian army is delivering symmetrical strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the authorities are ready and will not only defend the infrastructure but also carry out retaliatory strikes.
What will happen with electricity? Today, it's hard for me to say. We will be ready for any retaliatory challenges. We work on this every day. We will defend, we will fight. Russians should know that, step by step, we will increase the production of everything so that they too feel what we feel. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. In
2025, Russia is experiencing a trend of increasing electricity shortages as of October this year. The shortage of capacity in the power grid reaches tens of gigawatts. This was reported by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
Due to demand from industrial, residential and municipal consumers exceeding the total generation of all power plants, as of October this year, the shortage of capacity in the power grid has already reached 25 gigawatts. Despite attempts by the REF government to introduce at least some measures to stabilize its energy system, such as monetary compensation or discounts on electricity bills for voluntarily reducing consumption during peak hours, as well as disconnecting consumers who do not require guaranteed power supply, the growing electricity deficit indicates a systemic crisis in the Russian energy sector. The Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
In addition to wear and overload, systematic strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces are also affecting the Russian energy system. If Ukrainian strikes even partially damage Russian thermal power plants, this will cause significant problems for Russia's energy sector. The Ukrainian armed forces have already brought a blackout in southern Russia 60% closer.
Ukrainian strikes are gradually knocking out high-voltage substations, which make it possible to transfer electricity from one region to another. If thermal power plants are also destroyed, they will face a much more difficult situation than we do. Alexander Karchenko, director of the Energy Research Center.
Not only Russian regions, but also Moscow are suffering from Ukrainian drone attacks and power outages.
And this is indeed a very serious...
It has a very serious, not propagandistic significance directly for the Kremlin. Let me remind you that one of the reasons for launching the so-called special military operation was the issue of guaranteeing the security of the Russian Federation itself. How did Putin and his inner circle explain this? We see how the war is coming directly to Moscow. And not just Muscovites. We see that the geography of Ukraine's drone attacks is expanding.
Ukrainians have long since gotten used to and adapted to power and heating outages. But for Russians, this is an unexpected surprise. So it's time to start stocking up on matches, candles, and firewood.
Urgent alert from the Zaporizhzhia direction. The front has flared up. The enemy is pushing for a new offensive. The situation is changing by the minute. The stakes are at their highest. Lightning-fast strikes are breaking through enemy formations. Fierce battles of hellish intensity are already in full swing. What's happening there right at this moment? Watch.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation have shifted their priorities and launched an offensive on another section of the front.
As of today, Russian occupation forces have concentrated their main effort in the Zaporizhzhia region, where they are currently attempting to encircle the town of Huliaipol from both the east and the north.
On the Zaporizhzhia axis, Russian troops are increasing the pressure.
To achieve this, just recently, they crossed the Yanchul River, which allowed them to directly reach the settlements of Sladkoye, Ravnopol, and also Yablokovoye.
The occupiers are rapidly advancing towards Zaporizhzhia and bypassing the defensive line through the Dnipropetrovsk region.
To the north, along that same Yanchul River, Russian occupation forces are also trying to increase pressure on the Dnipropetrovsk region, moving toward Pokrovsk through Mezhdurechye, Volchye, Voronaya, and along the way. Again, Yanchul on both the right and left banks.
In the direction of Huliapol, the occupiers are trying to cut off Ukrainian logistical routes along two highways.
They will establish a connection to Pokrovsk, and then they will simply have logistical support, pushing as many as 10 military armies onto this bridgehead, creating troop density, and then forming a strike towards Zaporizhzhia.
The Russian command is giving increasing priority to the Huliaipol direction. Reinforcements are being transferred here from the Dobropilya direction, from near Pokrovsk. The situation near Huliaipol is tense. The American Institute for the Study of War also reports on this. Since the end of August 2025, Putin's army has managed to capture about 250 square kilometers of territory. Deep State shows that the front line is less than 1 kilometer south of Huliaipol and 6 kilometers northeast of the city.
Mostly the field with Apollos and the fields lead to Selinaya Bal, which is a landscape reserve located south of Ravnopol. Essentially, there are only a few kilometers left to Huliaipol, roughly about 5 to 7 kilometers depending on the direction.
The commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, spoke the day before about a significant deterioration of the situation in the Huliaipol direction.
The situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipol directions, where the enemy, taking advantage of numerical superiority in manpower and equipment, advanced during fierce fighting and captured 3 settlements. The military groupings of the southern forces are engaged in exhausting battles for Ravnopilya and Yablokove. Appropriate support measures are being taken. The aggressor has suffered significant losses from combined fire.
About the Russian advance. Recently, Russian war correspondents have also been reporting on the situation in the Huliaipol direction. Units of the Vostok group of forces are advancing on the Ukrainian city.
You have to watch your step very carefully because there are a lot of mines, and constantly keep an eye on the sky because, well, their drones are flying around, both FPV drones and Mavics.
This is the Russians' new operational concept. According to Ukrainian military sources, the enemy is suffering significant losses during attempts to advance. Huliaipol is a very important settlement in the defense of Zaporizhzhia. War correspondents also note this.
After Guliaipol, there will be Orekov. And then, apart from Kamishuvaka and Stepnogorsk, there will be nothing to stop the enemy from getting to the southern outskirts of Zaporizhzhia. This will also affect the PGT. Pokrovsko. If the enemy captures it, he will be able to reach Volnyansk.
The Russian army is carrying out systematic airstrikes on Pokrovska in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The footage shows the aftermath of Russia's terrorist acts. Vehicles have been destroyed, buildings have been ruined. This is the center of the settlement. The Russians' plans are to strike at the rear to complicate supply lines, destroy logistics and drone operators, as well as to carry out targeted incursions behind the lines. After that, small assault groups conduct operations, trying to advance quickly and force Ukrainian units to abandon their positions.
However, it is important to note that this is such a deeply negative and troubling development that it could very well become a significant precursor to the gradual formation of a foothold and the necessary conditions for the Russian occupation forces. In the future, this situation could potentially even allow them to organize and launch a coordinated offensive operation toward the strategically important city of Zaporizhzhia.
Volodymyr Zelensky visited the front in Zaporizhzhia region on a working trip. He listened to reports from the commanders. Wishing you health, guys.
Glory to Ukraine. It is my honor to be here today and to present awards to the members of the 65th Brigade. Thank you for what you do for defending Ukraine.
Despite the enemy's efforts, the fighting continues. The best assault units are fighting for every centimeter of our land. Sensational. The Kremlin is in a panic, begging for negotiations. Moscow is already pleading with Washington to intervene and persuade Kyiv to come to the table. But what secret scenarios between Zelensky and Putin are actually possible right now? And what decisive role could Trump play in this? Watch.
Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have been suspended. According to Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kislytsia, Putin refuses to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky, and the meetings with the Russian delegation in Istanbul have not yielded any tangible results. In
the conditions of a dictatorship, it is impossible to have productive discussions with negotiating teams representing the dictator. They have a very strict mandate, and they must defend the position they have been instructed to uphold. According to
As a result of the negotiations in Istanbul in the spring and summer of 2025, Russia did not change its previous demands, including those regarding the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine.
They are well aware of our position. As I already mentioned, our official position is clearly written down on paper. It is not a secret or confidential information at all, and everyone can see it if they wish. It was voiced by President Putin in June of 24 when he spoke at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
At the same time, Lavrov stated that the Kremlin still hopes for a meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. However, the White House no longer believes in the Kremlin's empty promises.
Moscow's intentions can only be judged by its actions, and it has made it clear what it wants. It wants the rest of Donetsk region, and obviously Ukraine will not agree to this. Right now, we see that Russia continues to carry out long-range strikes on Ukrainian territory, apparently to destroy its energy system and, so to speak, demoralize the country.
Currently, Russian diplomacy is trying to shift the blame for the breakdown of the negotiation process onto Ukraine. Moscow has no intention of ending the war, but at the same time, the Kremlin does not want to be left without a dialogue with Washington.
The Russians are now trying to somehow break up this diplomatic ice, to shatter it in various ways. And let's say both formally through diplomacy and informally. They are currently working on the G7. Through communication channels, they most likely tried to resume Once again, the Istanbul negotiation process. But in any case, the Russians are not ready to accept Trump's ultimatum. And Trump's ultimatum is very simple. Any political negotiations will begin only when the fighting stops.
According to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Washington has practically exhausted its potential to strengthen sanctions against Russia. And now it will focus on enforcing the existing restrictions. And once again, the White House is urging its European colleagues to put more pressure on Russia, in particular regarding Putin's shadow fleet.
It is also important for Europe to participate in this negotiation process, because after all, this is a war being fought on European territory. And Europe, one way or another, plays an important role in ensuring, let's put it this way, the general framework of European security in
the matter of ending the war in Ukraine. The White House administration will no longer fall for Putin's tricks, such as the empty talks in Istanbul with the pseudo-historian Medinsky or the fruitless Alaska meeting.
Trump won't agree to another meeting in the city of Anchorage, Alaska, under the current circumstances. A political slap in the face, yes, a humiliation from Putin. Well, because I think he's already tired of getting these slaps from Putin.
Under the conditions of significant sanctions pressure, Putin will likely have to abandon his maximalist demands and agree to direct negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Urgent news from the USA. Trump has signed everything. The longest shutdown in history is over. What does this mean for Ukraine? Full-scale arms deliveries from the US are already on the horizon. And most importantly, how will this change the course of the Russian-Ukrainian war? All the shocking details. Coming up next.
You can't run a country like this, Trump said, and ended the shutdown. The President of the United States apparently likes to break his own records. The budget pause lasted 43 days, which is 8 days longer than the previous pause under Trump. And
now it is an honor for us to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
the shutdown had consequences not only for Americans, but also for countries dependent on Washington, including Ukraine.
This is overall a very serious sign, a symptom of a deep crisis in the political system of the United States itself. In today's world, where quick responses and effective work are necessary, this is an unaffordable luxury. So yes, on the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but this is only a postponement of the deadlines.
While the US government was at a standstill, $5 billion worth of arms exports also came to a halt. This aid was intended for NATO allies, including Ukraine.
The processes for supplying weapons to Ukraine were under the jurisdiction of the Pentagon. And the Pentagon, as I mentioned earlier, was not shut down even during the government shutdown. Yes, there was a certain imbalance, a breakdown in communication, because some government employees were directly affected by the government shutdown. For example, those working in the Oval Office and certain individuals in related ministries and departments. And here, indeed, the logistics of making important bureaucratic decisions were partially disrupted.
Now that the shutdown is over, the blocked arms supply contracts are coming back into effect. But the question is how quickly all of this will actually start working.
At the same time, the process has been unblocked, and now the bureaucratic and procedural aspects will, of course, be implemented much more dynamically than before. Does this mean that Ukraine will receive the necessary weapons more quickly? It's hard to say. Here, we really need to rely more on the official position of our delegations in the United States.
The unfreezing of American contracts has also become an important signal for NATO allies.
Of course, all NATO countries look to the key NATO country, the United States of America, because all the processes are tied specifically to that country. Both the military-industrial complex, the coordination of military contingents, and military training, in short, absolutely everything. All of it is focused on the United States. And when the United States, for about 2 months or so, ends up in a kind of limbo or half position, of course, yes, this has a certain negative effect on NATO as a whole.
But in the Kremlin, they surely understand that the end of the shutdown is not in their interest at all.
When the United States is destabilized from within by processes like a shutdown, of course, the Russian Federation will only add fuel to the fire. That's obvious. And they will spread disinformation and do whatever it takes to drag out this process until the states stabilize, remember about the Russians, and are able to act in a more unified way. For example, to strengthen this sanctions package, or say to start working on the next one.
But what's interesting is that the temporary funding for the US has been extended until January 30th, even though the issue that caused the shutdown in Congress still hasn't been resolved.
On the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but this is only a postponement of the deadline regarding the issue of healthcare reform, which the Democrats are talking about its extension. Well, Obama's, yes, they have to return to it in December, at the end of December. So yes, the processes have been unblocked, but they can also now lead to other budgetary consequences.
According to economists' estimates, the daily losses from the shutdown for the American economy amounted to about $15 billion.
Shock. Putin is fleeing Moscow. The capital of the Russian Federation is no longer a safe place for the dictator. And the bunker dweller is taking refuge in Valdai. Goodbye, Russia. In a panic, Putin tries to create the illusion that he is close to the people, but in reality, he is hiding from the strikes of the Ukrainian armed forces. Watch all the shocking details right now.
Putin's office. It turns out that for years, the Russian dictator has been hiding where exactly he is and from where he governs the country.
For the past 10 years, we have constantly seen Putin in this very office. The bright, functional office, with an area of 120 square meters, is located on the second floor of the new representative building in Novo Ogaryovo. Outside the windows, there is 1.5 kilometers of forest. You can't just peek inside from the street. That's where Putin makes important calls, holds video conferences, and meets with people. And according to Kremlin reports, Putin spent almost the entire 2020 to 2021 pandemic working there. Or did he?
After reviewing dozens of hours of broadcast from the program Moscow, Kremlin, Putin, archives from the Kremlin website, government procurement documents, building plans, routes of Putin and his entourage, as well as hotel bookings and business trips of state TV employees, journalists from the System project have established that since 2015, exact replicas of the suburban office have been created for the dictator to conceal his actual location at any given moment.
The Kremlin uses these replicas to create the illusion that Putin is working in the Moscow suburbs. In reality, a significant portion of the footage supposedly from the Moscow region was filmed in decoy offices far from Moscow.
As of today, at least 3 absolutely identical offices are known to exist in different parts of Russia. In Novo Ogaryovo in the Moscow region, at the Sochi residence Bocharov-Ruchey, and in Valdai. Each of them replicates the original interior down to the smallest details. This includes the color of the walls, the arrangement of the furniture and decorative elements so that viewers cannot tell one room from another. The complex system of duplicate offices allowed the dictator to record addresses and hold meetings from different parts of the country, creating the illusion of stability and a constant presence in the same office. Despite the apparent identicalness of the rooms, journalists have uncovered small but telling differences. The height of the door handles, lines on the walls, and the arrangement of folders on the desk. It was precisely these details that became the key to exposing the carefully concealed deception.
By drawing 2 lines, we can confidently say which room Putin is using. Here is Novo Ogaryovo. And here is the copy office. And again, here is the original. And here is the copy.
Since February 2023, Putin has practically stopped using the Sochi office after he began to fear strikes from Ukrainian drones. The Bocharov-Ruchey residence, once convenient and safe, turned out to be vulnerable, and the dictator started looking for more hidden and secure places to work.
Even though several air defense positions have been set up there, it's still quite close to Ukraine, and the long-range capabilities of Ukrainian drone forces make it possible to cause a lot of trouble there. A lot of fun, so to speak. That's why Valdai is farther away, better hidden, and the terrain there is better. Well, it's in the forest, it's a residence in the woods, and in Sochi, it's a residence in the mountains in a fairly open area. But it has a view, you know what I mean? So when you build yourself a residence with a view so you can see both the mountains and the sea, it's not just that you can see the sea, but people at sea can also see you a little bit. That's why Sochi has dropped out of the list of his 2 favorite residences.
Since the beginning of 2025, the same fate has befallen the suburban office in Novo-Ogaryovo. Now, Putin's addresses and meetings are recorded in two different offices, one in the Kremlin and one at Lake Valdai in the Novgorod region. It was there that another office was set up. Journalists claim that the Valdai residence has become the main home for Putin's secret family, unofficially formed with gymnast Alina Kabaeva. There, the dictator could hold private meetings and record addresses, passing them off as footage from the suburban residence. He
also has his own distinctive features. The first is a switch. It is located exactly in the center of the panel, not like in the original at Novo-Ogaryovo or in the copy in Sochi. The second is a seam on the wall, the one behind Putin's head. It is much higher than the panel joint. This office has its own writing set, its own unique pattern on the desk. In total, we found more than 150 photos of this office. Well, that's out of the ones we were able to identify. Let's once again show how the three rooms differ from each other. In all three rooms, the seam on the wall behind Putin is at a different height. This is how the positions of the door handles differ. This is how the thermostats are arranged in different locations. And this is what the desk and the document folder look like.
Analysis of video materials and travel routes showed that despite the apparent work in Novo-Ogaryovo, Putin could actually have been in any of the three mentioned offices. Journalists recorded how, on the same day, the president would appear in an office with one type of renovation, then a few hours later in another, and then back in the previous one.
Starting around 2018, a process has been underway. An absolute merging of the president's personal physical comfort, the body he actually has, with the needs of the state. In other words, the king's body ceases to be a human body and becomes a vast state hyper-object, which includes clinics, secret residences, and a second family. In fact, alongside the first, his wife did get divorced. And all of this no longer functions in the sense of, let's at least pretend that the president follows the rules and observes the ceremonial protocol. But instead, everything is arranged simply for the president's convenience.
And while the Kremlin creates an appearance of stability and power, in reality, the Russian dictator is afraid. He fears Ukrainian attacks, he fears losing power, he fears any signs of instability.
That's all. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to the next episode.